Hi guys, so this is Shalini and I'm back to you with another video, and today the topic is cardiogenic shock. So if you like the content and the video, kindly do like, share and subscribe, and also let me know your valuable comments in the comment box. The clinical definition of cardiogenic shock is decreased cardiac output with an evidence of tissue hypoxia but in the presence of adequate intravascular volume. That means the intravascular volume is good, but still the patient experiences decreased cardiac output and an episode of tissue hypoxia. So if you look at this picture, this is the normal heart-lung circulation. What happens is the oxygenated blood from the lungs will come back to the left atrium, and from the left atrium to the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, it gets into the aorta and then it supplies the whole body. From the different organs, the deoxygenated blood is carried back to the right atrium. From the right atrium, it goes to the right ventricle and it gets inside the pulmonary trunk. From the pulmonary trunk, it is supplied back to the lungs for oxygenation. Now, why have to told you this? That is because in case of a cardiogenic shock, there is no obstruction to the flow of blood. There is the intravascular volume is good, but then where is the problem? The problem is here. There is some cardiogenic factor or there is some risk factor with the heart which causes tissue hypoxia, which causes decreased cardiac output in the presence of good volume or good intravascular volume. What are the pathological changes that you see in a person who has got cardiogenic shock? Now, for example, I have listed down two cardiogenic factors, that is decreased contractility and valvular diseases. So, if you look at this particular picture, you can see the force of contraction, which will enable good or adequate blood to be pumped out and it will supply the organs of the body. But in case of decreased contractility, what would happen? For example, in case of right or left ventricular failure, the force of contraction will decrease and this will limit the amount of blood that is ejected out, or it will decrease the cardiac output. The second case is when you have a valvular disease. So in case of a valvular disease, for example, mitral regurgitation, what will happen? The blood from the left ventricle will go on to the left atrium, and from there it gives a pressure onto the pulmonary system through the pulmonary veins, and there is pulmonary congestion. That's how the patients will present to you with orthopnea or dyspnea, breathlessness, crackles in the lungs and things like that. For example, there is a right ventricular failure, or if there is a problem with the tricuspid valve, what will happen? There is backflow of blood from the right atrium through the superior vena cava, causing jugular venous distension. Also, there can be a pressure onto your inferior vena cava or your IVC, and the patients might present to you with pedal edema. So the whole issue here is not the intravascular volume. The intravascular volume is good, there is no obstruction, but then it is about some reduced cardiac perfusion, which is because of some cardiogenic factor. So what are the causes? This is according to the shock registry. It says that predominantly it is the left ventricular failure, that is almost 74.5%. And then, as I have already discussed with you about mitral regurgitation, it is 8.3%. There can be ventricular septal defects, which can be 4.6%. Left ventricular shock 3.4%, tamponade rupture 1.7%. There can be other causes also, which is almost 7.5%. The major clinical manifestations that you elicit in a person who has come to you with shock. The first one is hypotension or reduced blood pressures. The second one is absence of hypovolemia, as I have been telling you that the intravascular volume is good. And the third one is clinical signs of poor tissue perfusion. What do you see in a physical examination when you're examining such patients? So what you see is the skin is cyanotic and cool. There can be tachycardia or arrhythmias, jugular venous distension, crackles in the lungs, edema, S3 and S4 sounds may be present, decreased urine output, and systemic hypotension. So these are the findings that you can elicit in a person who has got cardiogenic shock. The cardiogenic shock classification. So there are 5 stages. The first one is at risk stage. That means it is a person who has got a valvular disease or who has got a contractility issue with a LV failure or a RV failure. So here there is no hypertension, there is no tachycardia, and there is no hypoperfusion. The patient is at risk of developing all of these but doesn't not have any sign. B is the beginning stage, stage B, where the patient has got hypertension, that means decreased BP, and tachycardia, that is increased heart rate, without any hypoperfusion. So there is no signs of hypoperfusion, but then the patient might present to you with reduced pressures and increased heart rate. The stage C is a classic stage where the patient presents to you with hypoperfusion without deterioration. That means the patient is stable, but there is some amount of hypoperfusion. D is a deteriorating stage where there is hypoperfusion and the patient is not stable, but there is no refractory shock. Extremis is a stage where there is refractory shock also. There is hypoperfusion, there is deterioration, and there is refractory shock. That means even after giving high supports, for example, high supports of inotropes, or the patient is put on ECMO, even after that the patient continues to be hemodynamically unstable, is where you say the patient is in extremis stage. So this is the Society of Cardiovascular Angiography and Interventions who has given us these stages. I have just put a picture of the stages with the clinical scenarios for students who would like to know how these patients might present to you with. So this is just another picture for better clarity. How do you diagnose patients who come to you with shock? So the first thing that you can think of is laboratory studies. So in laboratory studies, for example, you want to rule out MI. So post-MI cardiogenic shock, where you will want to do creatinine kinase or troponins or myoglobins and just rule out if the cardiogenic shock is because of MI. Or even check on the ABG and the lactate levels to know if the patient is in hypoxia. The second thing for the patient, which is very important as part of diagnosis, is doing imaging studies. For example, doing an echocardiogram, which will tell you what is the cause of the cardiogenic shock. Again, an ultrasonography, or which will tell you or will guide you for a fluid management. Also, angiogram, which can tell you about any infarctions or any blocks which is there. Electrocardiography or ECG is also one primary step which can immediately tell you whether the patient is in myocardial infarction or in failure. Invasive hemodynamic monitoring is where you will want to thread a catheter right into your pulmonary capillary and check the wedge pressures. So pulmonary capillary wedge pressure is one way. For normal people, it is less than 15 mm of Hg, but in case of cardiogenic shock, the wedge pressure is more than 18 mm of Hg. And also you will want to look at the cardiac index. The normal is 2.6 to 4.2 liters per minute per meter square. It is given in a range is because for an athlete, for a strong person with a stout body, will have higher body surface area. So this is basically the cardiac output divided by the body surface area. So it is different for different individuals, and this is the normal. But in case of a person who is in shock, it will be less than 2.2 liters per minute per meter square. Management of these patients, I have put it in 5 points. The first one is fluid resuscitation. Second one is pharmacological therapy. Third one is admission to ICU settings where you want to do a invasive hemodynamic monitoring. Definitive management is where you want to do surgical intervention or correction of electrolyte and acid-base abnormalities. Pharmacological therapy, here I like to tell you what is a drug of choice and why certain drugs are given in cardiogenic shock. So the drug of choice here is dobutamine, but you have to make sure that the pressures are good. So if the systolic pressure is above 80 mm of Hg and if the patient is not in tachycardia, then definitely you can think about dobutamine. But if the patient is hypotensing and the heart rate is high, then you'll have to think of dopamine. But the problem with dopamine is the myocardial oxygenation demand is high in case of dopamine. So dopamine you can start at 5 to 10 mics per kg per minute IV, and it can go up to 20 mics. So even after starting small doses of dopamine, if you feel that the patient is still hypotensing, then is when you start thinking about norepinephrine. Norepinephrine you can start at 0.5 mics and you can titrate it to maintain a MAP of 60 mm of Hg. So there are certain patients who will get even phosphodiesterase inhibitors, for example, milrinone. So milrinone is given in case of pump failure where the contraction is too bad. So it is a very good inotropic agent. But the only problem with milrinone is it has got vasodilating properties. So you will have to give some vasopressors along with milrinone. So that is milrinone. Then you can think of diuretics to take out the excess fluid, and also anticoagulants and antiplatelet inhibitors. The goal of management, oxygenation is the first goal. Second thing is improving the vascular resistance, for which you give vasopressors, and improving the force of contraction of the heart. That is why you give inotropes. And also definitive repair if the patient needs any surgical intervention, because in case of a valvular disease and all, unless and until you repair the valve, there is no use. So you have to think of a definitive repair also. So what are the definitive repair? First thing is percutaneous coronary interventions that you see. Here, for example, you have some blocks and you will thread a catheter inside along with a balloon and a stent. So after inflating the balloon, you will leave the stent in place and take out the balloon and the catheter back. So the stent interventions, that is called as percutaneous coronary interventions. Or you can think of coronary artery bypass grafting, where you develop surgical collaterals against the occlusion. So that is also one surgical intervention. The third intervention I'll talk to you about is IABP. IABP is another advanced method which you use to treat patients who are in shock. Now, how they do is they will use a balloon or a catheter which is inserted into the femoral artery, and it is threaded to the aorta, and it is placed just a little away from the subclavians. So what happens is, in case of a systole or in case of a contraction, this balloon will deflate and it will create a negative pressure. And because of this negative pressure, blood is pulled out of the heart. In case of a diastole or in case of relaxation, what happens is this balloon will inflate and it will push the blood back into the heart. But the second story in case of a diastole is when it is trying to push the blood back into the heart, the aortic leaflets are already closed. Because in case of diastole, what happens? The aortic leaflets are closed. So this blood that enters inside is redirected back to the coronary arteries and it increases the coronary perfusion. So there is a double effect. Here the blood is pulled out, increases the cardiac output. Here the blood is pushed in, and because the leaflets are closed, it gets into the coronary arteries and it increases the coronary perfusion. So this double effect is always good in bringing out the patients out of cardiogenic shock. What are the complications we expect? They can be cardiopulmonary arrest, dysrhythmias, renal failure, multi-organ dysfunction, ventricular aneurysm, stroke, and in very severe cases, death. So this is a gist about cardiogenic shock. So thank you. I hope that you liked today's video, and also let me know your topic of interest, your doubts, comments and clarifications also in my comment box. Otherwise, thank you and have a great day.